This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and Ewen McKenzie. The Wallabies found a way.
They sure did. After our last podcast, I actually went and looked at the odds, and it was $9.50. I even had a thought. Well, I even went through the calculations to see about. I thought that's not a bad bet, and they come home. So anyone that bet on them is laughing. They played really well. Like, they really were resilient, and after that. I mean, that was one of the fastest starts I've seen in a test match by South Africa. To be able to withstand all that and then turn that around and keep the pressure on and come up with the points, not just etch out a win, but like a commanding sort of record-breaking win was outstanding, you know. So all credit to the Wallabies. They really showed that it wasn't just a one-off against the Lions. They're really starting to build a bit of cohesion and a bit of a good reputation, which is great.
How, as a coach, do you manage those types of fast starts where the team that you're playing against just look almost unstoppable? How do you keep everybody calm, and how do you keep people on the path?
We'll throw to Eddie first, because he's got a theory about the first 20 minutes and how you play. But I think that they played fast, but you can't play that way for so long. And if you analyse that first period, you know, Australia dropped every high ball that came to them. I think they dropped 4, right? So South Africa were putting the ball up, getting the ball back, and then they went away from that. They probably got seduced by the scoreline, and then they went away from that, and that allowed Australia to come in. They went lateral, and then, you know, the Soali tries and things like the intercepts, all that stuff came back into the game. And then you had the hard work of the back rowers who were basically literally stealing the ball at key moments to stop the Springboks from scoring. You know, Hooper did it, McWright did it on a number of occasions. So that's how you get yourself back into the game. You need to get in there and mix it. And luckily, two things happened. Australia stuck at the task, and the Springboks strayed from their task. You know, they had a formula that was working, and then they just strayed from it.
So, Eddie Jones, you have a theory about the first 20 minutes.
Oh, well, just going back to your first question before we go to the 20 minutes, I think, Australia's now in their second year under Joe, and they've accumulated some experience. Yeah, Wilson's been captain for a period of time now. They got some good senior players there in Skelton. And so they kept calm. You know, the big thing is to panic a little bit and chase the game. They didn't chase the game. They stayed at it. On the other side, I think, like how South Africa played, they probably wanted to play like that the first 20, but the game of rugby is so intense now. It's hard to play with that speed for longer than 20 minutes. You need almost to consolidate for a period after that, and then your bench comes on, and then you can accelerate the game again. And you look at the natural flow of most games, they're like that. The first 20 minutes intense, there's a middling period of 40, 30 minutes, and then the last 20 accelerates. And I think, you know, great credit to Australia that they just hung in the game, stayed in there, kept that. And I think O'Connor was really instrumental there, because he was nice and calm and physical, didn't overplay his game, didn't go chasing the game, and they were able to get enough points to then put themselves in a position where they were putting pressure on South Africa to play differently, and South Africa went and chased the game, which is most unusual for South Africa. But if you just, you know, I was just watching the game. It's the first time I've ever heard Labamba played at Ellis Park. So it was almost like the marketing had grabbed the game, and it was this fun festival atmosphere. And I think, you know, even the best teams can get seduced by it. You know, and South Africa you look at their record over the last period of time, one of the best teams we've seen for a long time. And they got seduced by playing like that. And didn't really have the experience to get themselves back on track. Again, if you look at their selection, you know, there's very few experienced players in their back line.
So this 20-minute theory, what was your 20-minute theory that you were sharing with Ewen McKenzie?
Well, you just can't play fast and furious like that for longer than 20.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And you look at our game. Like a game of rugby, you got one carry, and you've got to have two blokes that then run great support lines and then do their job at the breakdown. So that the accuracy and the intensity of that contest, it's hard to keep doing for longer periods than 20. Of course you can sometimes, but you just can't do it. You watch rugby league and they just hit one up and that's all they got to worry about. With us, we've got one ball carrier, then you've got to have two support players who've got to be fast, they've got to be accurate, and they got to be able to do it within the judgment of the referee. South Africa got pulled up for one from the side early, which most referees would probably let go. He didn't let go, and that becomes a turnover and changes the game to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that on just adding to Eddie's point there, I mean they were ferocious and they were cleaning out, and in the end they forced Australia back from the ruck. The try that Khaleesi scored, the third try, I mean that pick and drive under the lock, that was a result of all that power and precision that they had at the ruck. But it also came off the back. They had continuity of possession. As I said, there was 4 high balls were dropped by Australia in that, so they were on the front foot the whole time. But then, they moved away from that and started playing a lot more lateral, and that brought guys like McWright into the game. He had the best game for some time. Number of steals. Hooper, he saved the day on the line with a steal. Some of those guys. And then we had the individual brilliance of Suwali and Jorgensen again. So some of these guys were, and Eddie won't say it, but they were investments that Eddie made back in the World Cup. And as much as people have opinions about the World Cup, a lot of those guys were targeted and they got their opportunities, and now they're starting to bear fruit. Nongor's another one. He went to the World Cup and he came off the bench and did a good job in the second half. Bell was outstanding off the bench. There was. I think the balance of the Australian pack is good, and but there's a bit in it. The penalty count was 10-4, right? Australia only gave away 4 penalties. That's the lowest penalty count I've seen. So we did talk last week about discipline being a major factor. No yellow cards, but generally speaking, and the possession was pretty much 50-50. Territory was, and they ran the same number of metres. So that means that both sides were carrying the ball and whatever. Generally, the referees tend to referee the defensive side, but the Springboks gave away a number of penalties in attack, some through good work by McWright and Hooper, but there was that one where I think the winger tried to push right into touch, and the referee said he'd flopped on the wall. That's either a line out 5 metres out Springbok throw in, or a line out 30 metres up Wallabies throw in. End up being that was an attacking foray by the Springboks that gets penalised, which is unusual. Normally the penalties are against the defensive team. And the Springboks end up with a warning. Good, all credit to they end up with a warning on defence for yellow cards. So, it was an interesting game on that side. The referee, he sort of abdicated the scrums to some extent. The Springboks got their mandatory, they got the penalty on their own put in for driving the Australian team back, so they had dominance, but that didn't show up anywhere else. The Springbok line-out was terrible. There's normally a strength of theirs, so I thought they'd tactically, Frost had them, he knew what they were going to do. You could see what was going on, so the Wallabies were all over them. So they had no source of possession. They weren't getting the penalties out of the scrum, and they weren't getting any decent line-out ball. So they're the things that they rely on for the base of their game. So they'll have to tidy their line-out up a lot. And all credit to Australia. When I said that none of the players were watching the videos on the aeroplane, well, clearly Frost was, because he knew what was going on, and he managed it really well. So, all hats off to him. He did a great job,
Eddie, your views on the refereeing? You and McKenzie there, satisfied with what Ben O'Keefe did?
Yeah, well, I think he did a pretty good job, mate. Yeah, he did a pretty good job in the game. He was fairly clear about the game. The breakdown was a big contest area, and I think we've got a growing trend in the game, and I think we've got to be careful about it, of taking the scrum out of the game. Now every time a scrum collapses and the ball's at the back, because we don't want to have resets, which I understand is a spectacle, but if we keep going down this track, the scrum will cease to be a significant part of the game, and then we'll lose part of the game. Because if you just look at the 2 games on the weekend, you had South Africa, Australia. It was probably the breakdown that separated the two teams. Then you go to the Argentina All Blacks game, and in the end it was probably the quality of their mauls that separated the two teams. And that's the great thing of our game, is that we can sit here and have ideas about the game's going to be won, but the game is moves and changes, and you're not sure which contest is going to be the most significant. Like the point was, Ewen was saying that early on, South Africa won all the aerial contests, but for some reason then they went away from it. Which has been one of their strengths. It's like putting butter on their bread. They stop putting butter on the bread and put it straight in the toaster.
So as coaches, because again, after the match, Erasmus, took the responsibility as the coach for getting it wrong. And I know, Eddie Jones, you often do that. And if I think back, you and McKenzie, I think you used to be a responsibility taker as well. Why do the coaches come out? Is it to protect the players? Is it to assume the responsibility, or is it indeed the coach's fault if the game goes that way? Because really, I would have thought the leaders on the field, particularly at South Africa, you've started well for 20 minutes, and it's at about that time that your senior players have got to be making those judgments about, well, this is working for us, kicking's working for us, let's keep playing that way. So why do coaches take responsibility at press conferences when really it's
probably because
it's the fault of the players on the field?
Well, in the end, the coach puts the players on the field. They choose the combinations, and the decision makers are out there. So I think Eddie mentioned before the Springboks had a relatively inexperienced backline. They didn't have the Willie LaRue, who they've used a lot over the years. He used to come in, maybe play at fullback, but he'd also drift up and play at 10 quite a bit and provide some guidance. Creel's their sort of defensive organisation. They were sort of getting stuck in there, but they didn't have the same in attack. So the coach puts the players out there, obviously with a game plan. So the coach has got to be the first one to say, well, maybe I got it wrong. If it doesn't pan out on the night, there can always be a horror moment on the field or something in a close game, but it was a pretty emphatic scoreline in the end. So you got to have a look and say, well, do we get the right players out there, the right combinations? And I was talking to Eddie before. I said, we wonder if Rassie's going to announce his team on Monday this week. It'll be interesting to see how quick he is off the mark after that result. Well,
he did actually say in his press conference that they'd selected the team for the second game before they even played on Saturday. But he did then say, well, post-Saturday, we're going to have to make some changes. But Eddie Jones, that coach taking responsibility, as I say, you've done it a lot when you lose games. But is that the reason that the coach has to take responsibility for those selections? Because as you have said many times, that's really the main job of the coach is selection.
Well, just supporting what you were saying and just maybe adding a point. I think firstly you are responsible. Like how the players play, the coach is responsible. Like you want your senior players to take control on the field, but sometimes you don't have that experience there. So, your messages before the game. I'm just thinking back with Japan against Wales. We played well. We won the first test, played them in the second test, and it was like 35 degrees, 85% humidity. So the ball was like a cake of soap. So we got young 9s and 10s, and I just said to them before the game, keep the ball in front of us. Now, we still wanted to play our game but be judicious with our kicks, but they took that as a message, we've got to kick everything. And so it gets down to my fault, right?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't able to get the right nuanced message to them. And sometimes you got to have that experience before you learn from it. Like, I'm sure our 9 and 10s now understand that much better. And I think South Africa, they wanted to go out there and make a statement. They want to make a statement. This is a new South Africa. It's almost like, South Africa wants to develop a game that's better than just kick and chase and contest. And they want to be this all court, be able to play from everywhere. Tony Brown's there as the attack coach, is the outstanding coach, and in the lead up games, they're showing bits and pieces of that. So that was their chance to do it. And maybe that's, slightly misinterpreted the players. Well, we've got to keep doing this. Doesn't matter how the game is, we've got to keep doing this. So let's keep going. Let's keep pushing it. So the coach is responsible. And I think the other thing is post the game, mate. There's no value putting more pressure on the players. Like particularly today with social media, I could imagine what's being said on social media now, like the poison that's out there. And you got to protect your players from it, mate, as much as you can.
Yeah. No, fair point. Hey, and again, something else that sort of has struck me over the last couple of weeks is the movement of instruction from the coaches down onto the field to the players during the game. Often you see the head coach obviously talking to people. Ewen McKenzie, take me through that when, as a head coach through the game, how do you get your instructions to the players and what is it that you are trying to communicate at different points in time?
It just depends on what's happening in the game. There might be an opportunity. You might see an opportunity, that something specific, and you want to get a message to a specific player about that opportunity on the field. Or it might just be about reminding them about some of the things that were practiced in training that were relevant to the game that maybe they haven't tried yet, or might be a kickoff or something. So it depends. You're not yelling at them, you're not berating them. You're trying to add some sort of intelligence to the pressure cooker of what's happening on the field. People remember I ended up on the sideline when I coached at the Reds, and I picked it up when I was in France because a lot of the head coaches stood on the sideline. You see, like Ricky Stewart does that in rugby league and other sports, mainly because I found it frustrating in the box. You were talking, you're getting like message. You're trying to give messaging to the runner to get a message out there, so you don't know. And Eddie talked about the nuances of messaging. Whether that's getting there the right way. So I positioned myself on the sideline and I could speak to the winger and be quite direct or quite specific about the message. So the winger who understands the game, or theoretically understands the game plan, could give the message to the captain probably better than maybe via a trainer or someone like that who's not involved in the tactical development of the game. They're not generally in those meetings. So that's why I started doing that. It gives you a poor angle for viewing. If you've got a computer or a screen, you can still see what's going on under the delay, but it allowed you to get that communication process without the frustration of there being intermediaries who don't understand the nuances. So that's just an aside, And in France, it's more about the emotion. So you can look people in the eye and you can project emotion. It's more. You can also project calmness. So it might be a pressure cooker out there that the coach can project calmness. The players can see you. They know you're there. And so they can come to you for a conversation or something in a water break or something like that. So that's why I started doing that towards the end. I did that for the Wallabies as well. So I just found that better all round. But that's just a personal thing.
And for you, Eddie, what's your instruction game plan, or don't you have one? When you're going into a game, are you calling it as you see it?
Oh no, you always have, again, mate. The thing you can coach is how you start the game. Like the first 20 minutes, you can have a plan how you start the game. Ewan always talks about the type of kickoff, your first line out plays. They're all things that are coachable. And then from that, after that first 20 minutes, it's adaptation. How do you adapt to the game? What's happening in the game? What's important? And then you might need to get a message on, right, let's go to a certain style of game. A very simple example. I can remember, and you might remember it, we were coaching the Brumbies and we were playing the Hurricanes at Masterton, right? And we were playing a trial game and they were building us, absolutely building us. They were flying off the line, 3 phases. How good's this, And then we just put a message on, we had I can't remember the call we had for pick and go. Let's change the pick and go. And then the whole game changed, So they're the things you're looking for. Can you just make a nuanced change to how you're playing?
I think I was running water. In giving the messages. I was
it might have been too calm.
I was the only one that could understand Eddie and Mel to get the message across. We solved the problem there. But just going back to while I remember, we just talked about the kickoffs. It was interesting in the game. I always look at that side of it. South Africa kicked off to the left, right? They never do that. They always kick off to the right. So it lends weight to they had some thought they changed it up. Maybe they saw someone there. They kicked off left, deep. Australia kicked off deep right, which they always do. So there was no surprise. The Springboks have their best catcher there. They caught those, no problem, exited. But then, to Australia's credit, they went to a centre field kickoff on the third kickoff, and that just changed the dynamics a little bit. So it just said that there's not going to be more of the same. You remember they've been under the pump, and so they kick off on after the third try, and they kicked off to the centre field. And I thought, all credit to Australia, they're actually going to try and they're doing something different. They're not just presenting the same. Because more of the same, you kick off, they score at the other end of the field. You kick off, they score at the other end of the field. You go, you've got to do something different. And they did. They kicked off centre field, and it just changed the dynamics a little bit. And, so that's where I think that the bit that Eddie was saying, you can plan for that. You can have a plan. The other things you can manage and practice and whatever to try and make sure that you're not just getting dealt to. In Australia, were getting dealt to in that first 18 minutes, and they did something different after the third try. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's good. That's exactly what you need to do, is try and do something different. And it just changed the dynamics a little bit, made the Springboks think, not just presented them the same picture where they would have practiced, Australia kicking off deep right. They would have practiced the exit scenario from that in training. You give them a different scenario, which they wouldn't have practiced. Different guy, I think, the back row here to catch the ball. It was just different. They caught it, but it had the potential to be, and so it meant everyone was out of position from what they'd practiced in training. So it put a bit of pressure on them mentally, at least. So I thought that was really good, and that was, and then things changed from that point on. Australia scored the next 38 points.
So just before we leave this game, great victory from Australia, tough performance, evolving team, being able to score points from long range. Jorgensen's try was peerless. Great skills, an evolving Australian team. The consistency that Australia's lacked for some time is starting to be shown. How then what are you doing this week as you get ready for Cape Town for this Australian team? Because it is so encouraging. Great victory, but there's still a lot of improvement, I would have thought, in terms of being able to play, multi-phase football like the Springboks played early in the game, just wave after wave after wave. We haven't quite yet seen that from the Australian team. So what are you focusing on this week ahead of the game this weekend? You and McKenzie, how would you be thinking about this week?
I already looked at this. You find stats online, so I had a look to see how the game went. The Springboks were still dominant in terms of line breaks and offloads. They were able to get through. What they did is they made a hash of it when they got through. They weren't able to. So in the end, they'll look through that and they'll probably tell themselves, well, we weren't far away. And if they hadn't stuffed up the line at just before half-time, the scoreline could have been 29-5. So it's a game of margins. So they'll be telling themselves that. They need to get their selections right. They've got to get their line-out sorted. Their line-out was average. So they need to be able to get some decent possession out of that area of the game. For Australia, they've got some injuries, so they're already going to have to accommodate some variations in personnel. But they'll go there with confidence. The one thing Australia can do is go there and know that they'll be in it for 80. That's the one thing that's reputationally and that's what they're developing. They're showing people they're not going to die in a ditch. Doesn't matter how well you go. You might play well for 20 minutes, 30, 40, 50 minutes like the Lions. We're still going to be hanging in there at the end, and they've seen that in the last 3 tests. So going down to sea level. They'll be pretty confident that they're a resilient side and they'll find a way. They're digging a bit deeper in terms of selections, but it might work for them. I think, Valentini will come in if Wilson's no good. That'll be good. O'Connor they won't change much in the back line. Ikitau's a question mark, so how they resolve the 12 position and the winger situations, the same will be changed there with each of the broken jaw. So there's a couple of things there that they've got to accommodate anyway. I think that they'll I saw enough signs in what they did. They had some really good little options to get outside the Springbok rush, and that worked. And so I don't know, unless the Springboks change their personnel and get taller guys to be able to cut off those long raking cutout passes that O'Connor threw to the winger direct, they're going to have to revise their defence. So there's plenty there to be able to work on tactically and technically. But the Springboks they'll want more pay out of their scrum. I don't know who's refereeing the next one, but they'll want more reward for their scrum dominance or potential dominance. So it's business as usual. They'll get on with it. They're going to get down to sea level. And get past their celebrations, but they'll realise they're in a good position now. Like if they can get past this game in good shape, you're into Argentina. So they're actually a good position in terms of the competition. So.
Is it a lighter week in terms of the physical preparation? Are you just trying to freshen people up, or are you loading them up on a Tuesday with another tough sessions?
They've just played one test. They had a break after the Lions. I mean, these guys, so we talked about the workload in Europe. The guys play every week somewhere. I don't think that doesn't mean they're going to bash the crap out of them because they've got a few injuries and whatever. So, but they'll train. I think they'll train normally. They'll feel good and positive. So I think they'll do whatever they normally do in terms of preparation and just make sure they continue to develop their tactics. They've got to understand that the Springboks will probably take a keener interest in what they did in the game, so that some of the things that they did might not work. But how good was it to see the run around that O'Connor executed? There was Mark Ella. We haven't seen that for decades. That little simple play like that, and you get a try out of it. So we're well served by some of the guys that have come into the team as a result of injury are actually doing a really good job. Hooper's another one who's I'm a big fan of and think should be in the back row. He's done a great job. Eddie played him as a 7 in the World Cup, and we saw those 7 skills there on the line where he saved the day. So we've got Bell off the bench. I thought he was terrific, and so we've got plenty to work with there. So Williams is doing a really good job off the bench, filling in for Skelton. He comes on and adds a lot of athleticism and improves or changes the line-out options. But Australia won the line-out just using Wilson, which was the Springboks wouldn't have expected. So they're going to have to do something about closing down the soft option at the front, because Australia got quite a bit of ball for not much effort, So there's a bit in it for him to work on.
So Eddie Jones, if you had the reins, how would you be thinking about this week if you're coach of either teams? Perhaps the Wallabies first, and then if you were Rassie, what would you be doing?
Well, Cape Town's a good place to be. Players like to be there. It's just keeping the focus right, mate. Getting the energy levels right, keeping the focus right. What little tactical changes you need to make, thinking ahead to what South Africa might bring. I think that the test ahead's going to be relatively simple. You would think South Africa would go back to their DNA, which they generally do after a loss. So it's going to be more blunt. It's going to be more gain line. They're going to come at them more. There's going to be more high kicks. So getting in the head of the players, because sometimes after a win like that, it's like a batsman who scores 100. Right, the good players know that next time they go and bat, they got to start again. Whereas the not so good players think they can just continue on where they're continuing on. So it's just making sure they understand, they've got to work hard, do all the simple things well. And as Ewan said, the big thing they've found, mate, is the resilience to stay in games. Like that's a really good part of this team that's evolving. They stay in the game. And for South Africa, it's how you sell the message. We've got to wind this back a bit now. Because when you got young kids and you tell them you want to play that way, and then you tell them we're not going to play that way, it can be sometimes difficult. So I reckon selection, I would imagine Pollard will come back in at 10 to start with, Delande at 12, Creel at 13, probably Cheslin Colby on one wing, Ardenson on the other, and then fullback's an interesting one for them. because there was a situation where they turned 2 lineouts over Australian lineouts, and then the second one they went wide, and it was almost that perfect situation where we go 2 passes to Villy LaRue, he puts it back in the right corner, and they ran and they threw the ball behind the winger, and Australia's back on the attack. So they don't have that sort of glue player in the back line. So who did they go to there for that player? Yeah, I'm not sure who they got. Like Vassie's he's an all-in type player. Willemsen's a bit the same. Who they play at fullback, and they maybe go for more like a Hendricks type 9, more a kicking playoff 9 a bit more than Williams, again, who's super fast and super good player. So I think selection will give you a pretty good idea of what South Africa will do. But they've probably got the easier week coming up. In terms of preparation, they know what they got to do. You just got to try to reduce the noise for their team, and Australia's got the harder week. Get yourself reset, get ready to go again.
Australia's got plenty to work on. We talked about the high balls and catching the high balls in the first 20. They struggled there. Twice because they were behind on the scoreboard. Twice they went for the corner rather than take the points. And both times they turned the line out over Australia, both times. So there's plenty there to be able to to really ice and be in the game earlier. Those moments were missed. So there's things like that they need to tidy up. The high ball catching side of it is going to be a big part, I think. I think that they'll bring Pollard in, and it'll be a completely different game. Just watching the way they play with Williams. Interestingly, when you're cleaning out, when the breakdown's going for you, which it was in the first 20, Williams is a real reacher as a halfback. He doesn't get close to the ruck. He reaches forward, gets the ball, and shifts it. And that works well if people are projected past. The clean-out's really precise and accurate. There's no hands. As the contest changed, it's harder for him because he's a reacher to get the ball. Whereas other guys, they'll get in and they'll mix it and they'll muscle the ball out there and keep the continuity. So I think that, the halfback selection will be interesting to see what they do there, because they've got to acknowledge the fact that Australia won't go away, and they'll get in there and they've got guys that are good at getting their hands on the ball. And it's the same as the Lions series. I actually think right now in rugby you've got to have, and the All Blacks have made a change in the way they're picking their team. They've got a genuine on-the-baller. We've got 2 guys. McWright was another guy that went to the World Cup under Eddie. There was obviously a lot of talk about Hooper not getting picked, but McWright went, and I think he's in. Here we are a couple of years later, and he's one of the first picked. You need guys like that get in, and I think Quagga Smith is a guy that can do that, and he tried. He came off the bench twice, and he tried and gave away penalties twice. For not getting that right. So you got to be accurate at that. We've got some good players at it. Hooper showed he's good at it, and we've got others. Pollard's good at it too. So, I think there's a lot in there for the South Africans to think about in terms of their selections, because Australia won't go away, and the ruck contest is going to be the key again, I think. And that's where the winning of the game will be in the ruck for Australia.
Eddie?
Can I just add to that, Pemby? Well, I think firstly, just going over about the breakdown of the ruck, Laurie Fisher, he's been a long time great coach in Australian rugby, and I think he's coaching the breakdown there, and he's doing a super job. The other thing that just strikes me, 3 of the South African players that probably didn't have a great influence were Marks, Zajaga, and Quagga Smith, who used to be a hard on the baller, but those 3 all play in the Japan League, and they all looked a little bit off the pace. And, we made the comment last week that Australia's coming off of 3 hard tests against the Lions, and whereas South Africa probably haven't had the quality of test match, and you got those 3 guys who are playing their domestic. And Quagga Smith, when he plays in Japan's he runs the ball, he tap kicks, he does chip kicks, he does everything because of his team. And so, his normal game's probably evaporated a little bit. He's lost it a little bit. And, when Van Staten went off, they really didn't have any pressure on the ball at all. Even Marks, who's pretty pretty good on the ball. It's really struggled on the ball, which again, I think is a quality of the Australian work. And then secondly, maybe those guys are just a little bit off the pace because of where they've been playing domestically.
So just a final question that I have about the scoring of the Australian team. It's at the moment we're getting our tries from a long way out, either intercepts or quick turnover balls, and we're able to move, whether it's Wright or a Suoli'i or a Jorgensen. What are your observations about the attacking game of the Australian team? And as you mentioned there, Ewan, when we did get into those close attacking lines, we lost a couple of lineouts and therefore weren't able to attack from close. What do you observe about the Australian attack at the moment that needs to improve perhaps so that we can be, score points closer to the try line rather than relying on moments where it's either an intercept or it's a quick turnover or it's a mistake and then it's a 70-metre run to score.
I think Australia's pretty good close to the line. I just don't think they got close to the line. They ended up scoring from further away because those opportunities came up. I made a note, and I might be wrong. I think Suoli's first touch in attack was in the 27th minute. Where I saw him with the ball, like in an attacking sense, from not just getting the ball from a kick or something. He barely touched the ball in attack. But that you got to remember that South Africa dominated for 18 of those minutes, so he's not getting it. Ikitau obviously did carry the ball, and to his credit, they had a play of it. He went short side and used his left boot, which was great. So some variety there. So it's evolving for them, but they're getting injuries. That's the second time that we've had with the winger coming off injured, Peach coming off injured. So they're not getting the continuity of personnel out there, and a different 5'8". I thought O'Connor did well, but I think they'll be better as a combination. But now Ikitau's injured, so it's hard for them to get cohesion. But it's evolving. They're doing enough, but you wonder. You take out Suoli's brilliance, you take out Jorgensen's brilliance every week, like his ability to score a try every week, and the scoreline is a bit different. So we are relying on those guys individually to create something. Wright, same thing. I mean, Wright was fantastic with ball in hand, but I think he dropped 3 balls in the first half. So we've got to get better. There's plenty to work on, and I don't think anyone the good thing was at the end of the game. Given the circumstances, the siren went, the referee blows the whistle. None of the Australians were double air punching or none of them. They were relieved. They were happy. They were certainly happy, and they posed for photos later, but it wasn't like they were over. They looked to be calm and in control of their emotions, and I think that's how they play. And clearly got a good group there that'll be able to switch on for the next contest. But it's still work in progress.
Yeah, Eddie, your thoughts there before we move on quickly?
Well, I probably see in the 2 years that they've gone away from that more structured, longer phase type attack to a more quicker. If we get some space on the outside, put the ball through. Yeah. So they're playing lower phase rugby, and in a way it's suiting them because then they're creating counter attack and turnover opportunities because of the pressure they were able to put on the attack at the breakdown. So I think it suits this team really well, and I think maybe Joe's made that assessment because at the start they looked like they were trying to play like Ireland, which has obviously been successful for Ireland. But it just seems now that that's loosened off a little bit. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe that might be part of it.
Yeah, and, isn't Jorgensen something? Just that try. Oh, my God.
You got guys like that, mate. They win your test matches. Suoli and Jorgensen, that's 2 tries. Like, that's the game. That's the game. Like Suoli picks off the pass, timing on the pass. Jorgensen, creates an overlap situation from 50 and scores a try. Like that's the game. You win the game through that. And that's the beauty of having good players like that.
Yeah. Very good. Well, fantastic. Well done to Australia. And we all look forward to this weekend. And again, those selections during the week to understand the teams. Interestingly, the news this morning is that Will Skelton will be returning to Australia to continue playing for Australia during the Rugby Championship. There was plenty of speculation that he would be jumping on the plane and heading back to France, but that obviously is very good news for the Wallabies as they continue through the Rugby Championship. But we move to Córdoba, and the All Blacks win 41-24 over Argentina. Ewen McKenzie, what did you take from that particular match, described by some in New Zealand as clunky? Certainly they got away well, went to sleep a little. The Argentinians came back, but strong enough at the end to win quite comfortably there.
It was a good scoreline in the end, but in the end it was a closer game, and it was a different game. When you look at we were just talking about long-range tries, pretty much that game was all short-range stuff. From both sides, so pick and drive and sort of real gritty, sort of tough football. So not a classic viewing spectacle, but enough. The All Blacks will be happy that they did enough. They've got, they're under pressure at 9. There's a couple of positions they're going deep on, but I like their forward pack. I think their forward packs is a forward pack for all games. It's not going to be the biggest forward pack, but they've got a really good, well-balanced line out now. The scrum's pretty effective. They've got a good on-the-ball presence, and they can all carry the ball, So I think they've got a really good balance there. So he's developed that over time. So that's good for them. The Argentinians were, they're competitive. They'll be disappointed playing at home and not coming up with a closer result. But they're actually in the game, so they'll be looking forward to the next game, just like the Springboks will be. So looking to try and get some sort of redemption, but a different type of game. As I said, it was one pretty tight and gritty in the end. Not a great spectacle.
And Eddie, what was your thoughts?
Good win by the All Blacks, mate. I think they'll be really happy with that. As Ewan said, it wasn't a free-flowing game. It was a very tight, hard game, and it was like rollerball, wasn't it? You get inside which team got inside the 22, and they're able to either roll them all over or put enough pressure on their pick and go to create space on the outside. Argentina, they're going through, I think, a bit of evolution in their team. It looked like they went very much to play off 9. The halfback ran a lot and struggled in the first half. The timing off him wasn't good. But in the second half, when the defence probably got a little bit more fatigued, they started to get some head and shoulders through and looked a much more dangerous team. But nothing in the game. I thought the referee probably struggled at the breakdown a little bit. He gets out of position a lot. Like he's one of those referees that referees in the defence line.
I saw that.
And it just, the World Rugby's got to do something about that. They've got to get him out of the defence line, close to the line. When they score an easy try, Argentina, he's not in position to see it, right? Because he's either got to be behind that defensive ruck or behind the attacking ruck, and he's on the side and he misses it. Like, that's not a TMO when the bloke puts the ball down with one hand, right? We should never have the TMO coming in there. So, that makes it a difficult game again, where you're not sure what's going on at a breakdown. So, good win by New Zealand.
Okay. Excellent. Well, lots to look forward to in the second test match there next weekend. We do have a number of comments that have come through from Pierre Schwanipool. This channel is pure gold for me as a South African. The analysis is sharp and the banter is on point, and every episode feels like sitting down with mates who actually know the game inside out. You don't just watch, you learn, you laugh, and you can't wait for the next one. Easily one of the best rugby shows around. Please keep it up. So thank you, Pierre. And from Johan, really appreciate the discussion and analysis of the referee. First podcast where it's being done. Great work, Ewen and Eddie. Now, we also have a question that came in, and it's a question to both of you, and it's from Tedorocta, or I think that might be the name. On YouTube, people have got all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But it was a question to you, Eddie, to start with, but I'll get your views as well. And it's the leaking of information out of the team, whether it's team selection or other things that happen when you've got a team, and clearly there's information that is getting out. Tedorocta wanted to know, how do you deal with it, and does it give you the shits, when information is coming out of the team that you would prefer not being in the public realm? So, Eddie Jones, to you first, whether it's team selections or other things, how do you deal with leakers? Do you hunt them up? Do you hunt them out? Do you go looking for them?
Well, let's be realistic about how most of the information comes out of the team. I remember when I got first appointed Wallaby coach, I got a phone call from the most esteemed rugby journalist in Australia at that time. And he said, like every Australian coach has given me the team beforehand, I expect you to give the same thing. And I wasn't one who ever wanted to court favour with the journalist. I wasn't that sort of coach. I just made a decision to do that. And everyone makes their own decisions. So I said no, and the relationship was never real good after that. But that's how it is, But most of the leaks come from within from the team. Like, if you want to get a message out, particularly when you're dropping a player, the coach can do that, or his media guy, or someone can do it. So it's very rarely a leak from the team. The only other thing that has evolved over the last period of time is rugby managers or agents are leaking information when their player's not selected or he's going to get selected. Like there was that classic George Ford, Owen Farrell in the 2015 World Cup, where that was leaked by one of the agents. Right. Who was going to be in and who was going to be out. So the agents is something you can't control. All you can say to the players is, please don't tell your agent. But they got the agent ringing him up and they're saying, oh, I've got these beautiful pair of Nike running shoes, you're in the team this week. Come and get them and tell me. And so there's all that bits which are hard to control. That you can't control, but you can certainly control as a coach the team selection.
Okay. And Ewen McKenzie, information.
When you asked the question, I thought player agents straight up. Like it's a classic. It's a classic channel, because the person that doesn't get picked rings the manager and has a whinge saying they didn't pick me. And then he goes, "Oh, who did they pick? Oh, they picked so and so." And then someone next thing it's in the paper. So, but I'm like Eddie. I didn't like that idea. Sometimes you have to put your team out under embargo, so you did that for whatever reason. But that everyone got the team at the same time. Generally speaking, the journalists come to training sessions, so they'll come and look, and they'll start speculating from that point on. But I've noticed, it depends on how the coach talks as well. I've noticed that, Joe talks earlier in the week and he might sort of almost confirm someone in a position if it suits him to do that. So each coach does it differently. I tended to make the journos work a bit harder. I'd often train with the reserves to stay on team runs and stuff. You start with the reserves in and things like that. So you don't want to make it easy. But I think player managers is where where the real problem. It never used to be a problem, and suddenly it's been in the last 10 or 15 years. It's always player managers.
Did it ever be? But did you ever find that it disrupted the team, or were you able to largely be able to keep it under control?
It doesn't. The team already, as I say, the team knows what's going on the Monday, so it doesn't disrupt them in that sense. Maybe if someone's been controversially dropped or something, it might put them under pressure on social media or something like that or whatever. But no, it's just more annoying. You just like to think that you could be able to plan and give yourself the best optimal tactical approach to the game. And if things are leaked like 2 days before or something like that, then that sort of weakens some of the things you're going to do. I'm probably more worried about how you're going to play rather than who's going to play, because in the end, I generally have a methodical approach to selection, so therefore wasn't making masses of changes. It's a bit different when I was coaching because we didn't always, the bench wasn't used the way it is now. So, these days the bench also runs on with 20 to go and it's, seems to be all very orchestrated. Whereas in those days we didn't give those sort of guarantees that you're going to run on at the 60-minute mark like the front rowers all run on. It was all about performance. So I probably come from a slightly different era. So I didn't have that problem. It's just more like annoying than a real hindrance,
All right. Well, listen, audience, thank you. The third voice, we do need to more questions, more comments, please, that we can put to the panel so we can continue to bring your thoughts into the game as we help to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world through our discussions here at Rugby Unity. So a big thanks once again to Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie. Don't forget to subscribe on your favourite podcatcher, and as always, please leave us a rating or a review because it does help us to be found. And don't forget to follow us on social media as well, and there are links in the show notes. So also you can subscribe on our Substack for exclusive content, blogs, behind the scenes insights, some tour guides that were there for the Lions series, they're still there that you can pick up, and also full podcast access. So the link will be in the show notes for this episode. So the teams will be selected and we will be back with our preview for the second round of the Rugby Championship later in the week. But for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name's David Pembroke and it's bye for now.